Before I continue, I want to share with you something that Tim asked me during the break. He said, well, what about text readers that read these forms? How do blind people fill forms out? Or legally blind people fill forms out? Most of them will read the label, and the label here will say username, and then there's a text box. And so the blind person knows if they, as when the program stops, if that's what they're programmed to do, it stops and they heard the word username, they type their username. They press tab, the reader continues and says comments, and they type, 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 or just press enter, and so on. But what about buttons? There's no labels. The answer is, I don't know. No, we could Google it, and they'll tell us. But I asked him, well, do you have a reader? He said, not here. I have one. Oh, really? It's software, right? Is it hooked into your laptop or into your desktop? And
In my workstation.
in your workstation at home with surround sound and all that kind of stuff. I was just wondering if there's a way you could demo that. The software isn't free, or was it?
I can put it on my laptop.
If you could put it on your laptop, we can hook it in up here someday, and it'd be a cool demo to see what that's like.
Yeah.
To give everybody in the class a perspective on what we're really doing when we build these things. You know, close your eyes and now try to navigate the page type of thing. That would be pretty cool. And if I like the software, maybe I'd get to school to buy me some. Was it expensive? Do you remember?
Well, there's different ones, and it was like $100.
So no, not really.
It also takes your input too. So
Okay, so you can speak to it.
I can speak to it, and it also speaks to me because if I'm doing one thing on one monitor and I have 4 monitors on the workstation, I know what's going on and I know the commands that I can.
Okay.
It can speak to me while I'm doing other stuff. And
Cool. So you willing to demo that maybe Wednesday, or you rather do it next week?
I'll go home and get it plugged in. And,
We'll plan on it Wednesday then.
okay.
We'll probably shift rooms just so we can.
There is also one built into Windows.
Is there?
Yeah, it's in it's ease of access under programs.
Yep.
I just found it. What is it?
It's buggy.
Windows ease of access.
Mm-hmm.
Under narrator,
Okay.
and it will. I haven't played with it, but I know it'll read anything and everything.
Okay. So we'll let Tim demonstrate his and Reen demonstrate that one. No, that's okay. But Tim's is one. He said the narrator's a little buggy, and I'm not surprised because it's buried deep in the Windows menu someplace. But Tim's is maybe a little more professional. We'll take a look at that. If you're ready on Wednesday, we'll take a little time and see what it looks like.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, where was I? We were talking about buttons. We've got the 2 standard type buttons, but they're kind of boring. What if I want this to be different colors? I can style these and change the background color and stuff like that. What I normally do though to my buttons, I like to leave them looking like buttons, but I do like often having icons on them. So the first thing I didn't remember to do, so let's go searching here real quick and you can do the same thing. I'm going to use my browser and I'm going to go to images.google.com. I think that's what it is. Images.google.com. If not, it'll be close enough. Server not found. Okay, just go to Google.
It's google.com/images.
Images. Okay, that's the one I typed. .com. Images. Oops.
The internet's down.
Let's just give it up and let Google take me there myself to google.com.
Yeah, it is images.google.com. You had it right.
But I got nothing.
Yeah, I think we all have nothing.
Okay, so back to google.com. Images. And let's see, I want a submit. I don't know what kind of icon submit would, just kind of a green check mark. Let's just do a submit. Do a search for submit. And then what I like to do in my search tools, or is it just more? Yeah, it's search tools. Set a size. Exactly. And I want it to be relatively small for my button, so I'm going to do a 16 by 16. And here I have a nice green little check mark. Click on it and right click it and save that image. And I'm searching, that's not good on the Mac. instead of my virtual machine, but I should be able to move it. And I also want to find a clear. GIF file should be transparent. Someday maybe I'll revert it to a PNG. I also want to find a clear button. What happened to my sizes? Brooms, no. Eraser, yeah. That one's not bad. Just anything. You don't have to pick the ones I'm picking, obviously, but I'm just picking 16 by 16 because not giving me a type. Because they look halfway decent on a button. Say link, where's my, oh, I gotta click it to get to the image. And then I'm just gonna drag those into my images folder. And use them, I hope. What happened to my Notepad++? Did I close it? Uh-oh, portable apps. Okay, so I've downloaded a couple of images and I go back to my notes here and notice there are different kinds of buttons that we could create that are a little more stylish. The first one is an image button. I'm not a big fan of this one, but it's something that you can try. In my images folder, if I go look in there real quick, I have a button in here, if I remember right, that's a submit button. The picture itself is a button. Looks like a button. Fancy button with gradients and all kinds of cool stuff in it. It's just a picture. We could use that as our button using an image type. Okay, so it's an input, still an input, so it's not just a picture, it's an input. Type equals image, source equals the image location, alt, what do we do otherwise? What I don't like about this is it automatically results in a submit. An image button is a submit button. So what if I want an image that's a reset? Then you basically create two buttons and you intercept them with JavaScript and you say for the reset button, don't do a submit, change my mind, let's do a reset instead. There is a way in JavaScript to submit or to cancel a submit and to issue the command to basically reset the form in JavaScript. So we intercept it. So that's why I don't particularly like those kind. We're not going to do one of those. Instead, we can create a button, as I call them. So I'm going to comment these two out, just so you can see them in case you want them. And I don't require that you do this, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility. First button is going to be a submit button. And even the type is optional here. As my notes say, if you don't give it a type, it's just a button. Should have an ID. And if you want the server to deal with it, a name. But you don't provide a value. Instead, a button is a two-sided tag. And in between here, I can put whatever I want. And this is the contents now of the button, but it will still be surrounded by this button. So I think the first thing I want to put in here is my image. Source equals images slash, what did I call it? Was it check.gif. Alt equals, I'm going to put nothing in there right now because that's just the image. And I could set a size, but it's already 16 by 16 and it's pretty small, so I'm not going to worry about that either. And then afterwards, I can put in whatever text I want. And put another image on the other side. I can do whatever I want here now. Images above, images below, breaks, big buttons, little buttons, whatever you want. See what that looks like. Notice it's still a button. The gray box around the outside is not something that I asked for. It comes with that tag. If you want a little more space between your icon and the text, you can just put a non-breaking space in there. That's what I usually do. Could style the image and move stuff around that way. But that's a 16 by 16 icon. They look pretty good on a button. Challenge is finding one that's fairly complex and making it look good. Just copy that for my other button. Call this one a reset button. And I think this time I want the text first and then the image, so I'm just going to move them around. Just as an example. Which one you like is up to you. It doesn't really matter, but the point is you can do whatever you like. I think. I never tried that before. And I guess I should check to make sure they work. Those are my favorite kind of buttons. Don't have to think too hard. They are part of my CSS, so they do align with everybody else. And I can put images and text and stuff on them. The only thing you have to remember is give them a type, if you wish. Otherwise, it's just a button that just sits there. Doesn't do anything, but it's got an ID, and we can write an event handler in JavaScript that says whenever this button is clicked, deal with it. And again, that's coming later. Questions about that button? Okay. Can't remove the border. There may be styles that play with this, but I have not styled these buttons too much. I guess I'm just not too deep into making my buttons look like much. I'm looking for really fancy buttons. I'm going to get a picture button and a picture and use an image instead. But basic buttons that most of us are used to, a little bit of text, maybe a small image, I can make that happen with a button, and that's normally what I want it to do.
Do you have any idea why the CSS would not be affecting the new buttons? The forms.css?
This button inside the form tag?
Mm-hmm.
You spell button right? Did you comment out the label as well?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So the CSS is working, but you commented out the label that pushed them over. Can you tell mistakes I've made in the past? Boom, 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 boom. Nope, none of those. I don't know, but if it's not, it's usually one of those. Okay, form's looking pretty good. So now what? What else we got here? Checkboxes. Right. Checkbox for smoker. That sounds exciting. Type is checkbox. We can put a value on it. Okay. And then the value can be sent to the server. Nothing is sent. Oh, this is interesting. It's something that you're going to forget. If the checkbox is not checked, nothing is sent to the server. Now I say you're going to forget this because in this class it really doesn't matter much. But next semester when we want to grab the data that came off the form and stick the appropriate values in a database, nothing gets sent to you if the checkbox is not checked.
Oh, the I agree thing,
Nothing gets sent to the server. So you actually have to write code in the server to say, did I get a value for this? If I didn't, then put false in the database, otherwise put true in the database. It's not, did this value, what is the value? It's, is there a value? So when it comes to checkboxes, it doesn't really matter what you send, though you can send something. Right? This value is what gets sent to the server when the checkbox is checked. I've never written any code where I cared about that. I only cared about whether there was one. Though I could see in certain circumstances having a checkbox send one thing or another, but that's so rare. So let's add a checkbox to our form. I'm just going to keep tucking them above my buttons here. So after the password, I'm going to create another empty label this time. Yeah, let's not create an empty one. Let's just say this is my label 4 equals check smoker. Let's do that. That was right. And then an input, this is one of the inputs, type equals checkbox. I think it's checkbox. Checkbox. Value equals yes, which is kind of a lame value, right? Who cares what the value is? I've seen people put checked in there, or true in there, or whatever. Fact is, when it gets to the server, unless you really want to know what that text is, and most of the time you don't, all you really care about on the server side is it there? We'll see this happening here in just a second. And don't forget the break afterwards to keep all the wrapping from going crazy. I should, you're right, thank you. There's what it looks like. I might want the smoker to come after it. I guess I'm just kind of that way. I see the checkboxes in the front. I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. But as Reen reminded me, we probably want an ID, not probably, we do want an ID and a name. We might use some of that standard stuff for the name. That's what you check on the server side. Does an object with this name exist? If it does, then they checked it. If it doesn't, they didn't. I can keep talking about it now, but you're going to forget about it 3 months from now anyways, when it's going to pop up for the first time in web data management, where there's a checkbox on the form and you have to deal with it. Hopefully it's in my notes again then. Save it. Refresh the page. Put some stuff in. Check it. Go. Is smoker? Yes. Uncheck it. Not even there. And no, I didn't. Trust me, I didn't write anything special there. I suppose I could game it, but I didn't game it. This is a very generic site. You can send it any data with any name that you want, and it simply reports it back to you. It's telling me here there is no is smoker field. Never got sent. It's bizarre. But if they didn't do it that way, then they'd have to figure out, what do I send when it's true, what do I send when it's false? Not that that's so terrible, but that's not the way they chose to do it. If you want the label on the other side of my checkbox, then I'm going to put a non-breaking space in here. Maybe. And after this, I'm going to add a label. I wonder if both of them can be for the same thing. I didn't demonstrate this. I should have. Can I have two labels that both point to the same thing? That'll be interesting. However, when you do that, it messes things up a little bit, because why is this pushed all the way over? Well, there's a label here that's this wide, and there's another label here that's this wide. And this one floats. And so this is why I created that flow label style. So if you have a label that you don't want floating, you don't want a fixed size, you don't want anything, right, you change the label where to go here to a style equals, no, not style, class. Flow label. And what's interesting is these are actually going to flip. That's because of the floating. And the reason I did that is I can now put another checkbox, another checkbox, another checkbox, and they just all go across the page if that's what I want them to do. I also use the flow label for radio buttons because I like the radio button in front, not after, because that's what I'm used to. And radio buttons work the same way. If you stick a label on them. Now, I was mentioning that this label here, can I click on? I don't even know if there's a label there. It's a non-breaking space. Oh, it did it. Look at that. They both work. Huh. That's cool. Now, I probably shouldn't have this empty space be the checkbox checker. So you just take that one off up there. I want it to spread things out, but I really don't want it checking the checkbox. I was just curious to see if I could, and I can have two labels that link to the same object and check it for me without having to actually hit the checkbox. Questions about checkboxes? If you want it to be checked by default, that's not a typo, it's just old. If I want my checkbox to be checked, I simply say checked. You don't have to say checked equals anymore. HTML5, you simply say checked. Pretty sure. And refresh the page, it's already checked. So if the default is checked, you just say checked. You don't have to say checked equals checked. That's XML, I think. Now, what I haven't done is tested this to see if it's valid, see if I've done anything crazy. So I think I'm going to do that here real quick. Just to make sure I'm not leading you down some funky path here that's not correct. Oh, my lucky day. I'm actually pretty nervous. I've been done a lot of typing and done some stuff. Everything should be cool. Could do the same thing with the CSS, but I've been using that for a while. And if it's broke, I ain't changing it because it works good. All right, we got some time. What's left here? Checkboxes, radio buttons. Type equals radio. All buttons in a group must, here's a kicker, all buttons in the group must have the same name. In C#, you can tell a group of buttons based on the group box that they're in. All those buttons are related. In HTML, the buttons are related because we give them all the same name. And then each one gets a unique value. So we're supposed to do some, colors here. So underneath here, I'm going to put in another label. Don't forget my break. Actually, this could be a named label. But it's not for anybody because which radio button do I attach that to? I don't. So now inside here, I create an input. Type equals radio. ID equals, each one gets its own ID. RDO, blue. Name equals fave color. They all get the same name. But you can give each one, and you should give each one a unique ID so you can refer to a specific radio button in JavaScript. And it's pretty common to go and say, is this radio button checked? Actually, it's more common to say, are any of the radio buttons checked? Now that's my radio button. That'll create the button. And oops, that's the name. Each one gets its own value. That's the radio button. And now I want another label to be its text. We've already seen the flow label. This is another example of where this is primarily why I created them. See what it looks like. Forgot my break, that's why the buttons are up there. But there's blue, and notice if I click this, it clicks the radio button. Copy that 2 times so I can add a couple more colors. Now, because they all have the same name, what I do, lose my label in here someplace? Yep. Because they all have the same name, they work like radio buttons should. One turns off, the other one turns on. If I give one of them the wrong name, misname it, guess that was close enough, shouldn't be.
Refresh it.
Oh, I didn't, thank you. Like the case sensitivity wasn't there, but I wouldn't count on it on a PHP server. Because the names are different, they're in different groups, so I could create different groups. I don't have to put group boxes around them, though you can. I don't have to put group boxes around them and still link them together. Forgot to check to see what happens. Enter the data. It's still sitting over there. I thought I fixed that. Okay. Fave color, nothing selected probably. There it is. You can put a required on these and say that the fave color is required. You just put it on 1. And that way when you submit the form, this is Firefox. It's my first example of required. Let's come up here and say that the username is required. If I leave it blank, nothing happens. If you're in Chrome, if I remember right, Chrome immediately senses it and makes it pink but doesn't say anything. So it kind of puts this glowing pink border around it going, hey, 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 this is required. You don't have anything in there. And I haven't picked any of these. Submit. And this is an example of what it looks like in Firefox. There's a little pop-up. And you can change the title. I think this still stays, but it adds more text underneath if you put a title on this. Cool. I haven't seen that one in a while. So if I put a title on this to say that it's required, well, my title didn't work on the radio buttons. Let's try it on the other one. Where didn't the title appear? Maybe it's in a different browser. That title usually appears underneath here, somewhere in the same neighborhood telling you what's wrong. If I hover on this, it'll say enter the name because that's what the title does. But usually the title also, or used to, the title, and maybe it's a different browser, title used to display as part of the message. Firefox, at least this edition of it, does not seem to be doing that. So those examples are required. And radio buttons, and if you want one of your radio buttons to be selected by default, now this is redundant, right? There's no way to turn radio buttons off. So now that I have one that's checked to start with, saying that one of them is required doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I can change all this stuff, reset it, and when I reset it, it goes back, reset it, it goes back, because I said they were checked. Okay, let's stop there and we come back on Wednesday. We'll talk about combo boxes and list boxes, etc. And maybe group boxes. I tend to skip over that. That's the field set tag. You just put a field set in and then a bunch of radio buttons inside with all their labels. And we'll talk about hidden inputs, access keys, CSS we already looked at. And then we'll take a look at the new stuff in HTML5, and that's where maybe, depending on your votes, we'll let you do a little bit of work. All right, enough for today.